We did it one go. In order to have a meaningful critical mass to really make a dent in agility and directing the firepower to the most valuable item, we decided to go in one big bang. All the previous backlog have been merged into one backlog. We elevated implicitly the role of the product owner, because you are absolutely correct. The product owner is not a requirement analyst.
Welcome to the Product Agility Podcast, the missing link between Agile and product. The purpose of this podcast is to share practical tips, strategies, and stories from world-class thought leaders and practitioners. Why, I hear you ask? Well, I want to increase your knowledge and your motivation to experiment, so that together we can create ever more successful products. My name is Ben Maynard, and I'm your host. What has driven me for the last decade to bridge the gap between agility and product is a deep-rooted belief that people and products evolving together can achieve mutual excellence.
Hello and welcome to the Product Agility Podcast. My name is Ben Maynard, and today we are going to be exploring a topic which this podcast has not delved into for quite some time. When the podcast was founded many years ago, it was called Less Matters, because I wanted to really raise the awareness of the usefulness of large-scale Scrum as a system, as a school of thought, not as a framework per se, but something which provides a brilliant way to have all of your teams remain incredibly customer-focused, right? Or achieve that customer focus if it doesn't really already exist. And over the years, we've rebranded because we wanted to get more voices into the ears of our listeners, because we felt that less was constraining us a little bit. So today it's really nice to almost be coming full circle and welcome somebody onto the podcast who has an experience of large-scale Scrum, because he has been working with the co-creator of large-scale Scrum, a gentleman named Bas Vodde, who is a friend of mine, has been a friend of mine long before I became a large-scale Scrum trainer. So who is this person? I'm sure you're keen to know now. This person is Mauro Sacchi, and he joins us from Finland.
That is correct, Ben. First of all, thanks for having me here and for pronouncing my name correctly. My name is
this time.
Sacchi. Yes, I am calling in from Finland, where I'm located. On the other end, I guess my accent betrays me. I am Italian indeed, so I cannot think. So yes, and I joined from a company name, and thanks for having me here. Indeed, we have a common friend.
Yeah. So Wärtsilä, or I suppose in English as it's spelled, it's a Wärtsilä, isn't it?
I don't think I'm the right person to pronounce it correctly. The company I've been working on for 20 years, because I'm not a Finn, and I'll try my very best. It's called Wärtsilä.
Yeah. Like Godzilla, but Wärtsilä. That's how I'm going to remember it. It's such a dad joke. So, what on earth does Wärtsilä do? Because the name is intriguing.
Well, in a nutshell, first of all, it's a 190 years old company, so it has a lot of history. And its strength, it operates in two industries. One is maritime, and the other one is energy. So it's a heavy industry, and two relatively conservative also industry that are very global and very needed by mankind. In this industry, what we do, we specialize in equipment that is necessary to generate power. So both in marine and in energy. And as you can imagine, those equipment, so engines, combustion technology, are going through a very interesting journey called decarbonization. And that's what we do today. And that's what makes our day very interesting.
Yeah. So decarbonization was what you mentioned there, wasn't it? I mean,
that is correct. The whole industries are going through a decarbonization journey dictated by the Paris Agreements, and that translates in a lot of compliance and a lot of shift on infrastructural changes that are requiring a lot of technology development in all domains, mechanical, electrical, and software.
Well, this is what I was going to say, because you're talking about maritime and energy. What we're not talking about here is some nice kind of like B2C kind of web-based products here. We're talking, like you say, heavy machinery, we're talking hardware, we're talking software, we're talking everything in between. And layered onto that, the decarbonization agenda, which for the record, I think is the right agenda. And I hope that it accelerates the likelihood that, we become a wonderfully futuristic, joyful world rather than some grimy old dystopian one. So your role in Wärtsilä, given this great introduction you've given, what is it that you do in the organization?
I'm in charge for the digital research and development for our lifecycle business. So basically, as many industrial players, we are having a role in providing equipment to generate power, and even a stronger role in supporting our customer during the life cycle of this product, which, as you can imagine, is relatively long. It goes to 30, 40, even 50 years when you're talking about energy and power plants installations. In order to deliver these services, we need to develop a lot of solutions that are enabling us to monitor how the equipment performs, how it complies to the regulations, how it efficiently serves the customers. So my role is I'm the leader of the digital R&D organization that is developing these solutions to enable our lifecycle services. And as the name goes, digital R&D, sometimes, you use this word a little bit as a buzzword nowadays in corporate work, digital, but de facto what we do is a lot of software development and hardware development joined to deliver this kind of services.
So your team, so your part of the organization, your team is focusing purely on the software, but also looking at the hardware as well.
The whole hardware, the whole infrastructure that basically goes from an asset on the field, so either a ship or a power plant, the integration with the product, with the equipment, so the automation and control, whatever edge you need with computing, with data processing, the whole data pipeline, so connectivity and data pipeline until the cloud structure and the application in the cloud to help our people run the services for the customers. So we take care of the whole infrastructure, the software and the hardware that is needed to deliver, and also we take care of activating the service and life cycles, keep it up and running, which is not to be underestimated. Since you have an installed base of a lot of customers using your product, then you also need to maintain it properly.
Yeah. I mean, I think remember we had the little pre-recording chat a few weeks back. I think I might have mentioned it. I asked, do your customers own the hardware or do they lease it? Like airplane engines, like Rolls-Royce, they own the engines and they lease them out to people. But your customers, they physically own these pieces of hardware. And what you're then providing is this monitoring and compliance and kind of element to making sure that the life cycle of that product, that your products are effective for your customers for a long time, which is interesting because a lot of the time when some organizations deliver just kind of digital products, that's where things break down, is that they just deliver it and it's done. And then actually as customer support who maybe deal with the pain, but they're not actually actively monitoring it. I suppose that's what the hardware aspect to your products, I suppose that's where that element, that need comes in.
Yeah, that's correct, Ben. I mean, we do not lease this equipment for two reasons. First of all, in the energy sector, this is critical infrastructure from any country when you're having power generation for electricity, for example. So the customers, sometimes even government entities, want to own the asset. In maritime, it's very difficult because it's so custom built that it will not have any so-called residual value. If the customer will become insolvent, he will have to use it on another ship. So it's usually a sold equipment, which creates also the complexity then to deliver such services, because you do not own the equipment. In only very rare case in energy sector, we help the customer to operate it. On the other hand, usually we don't. So we need to be able to provide a service where, very often we, by the way, commit on the reliability, so the uptime of our product, sometimes even the efficiency of this product, without de facto owning it, not operating it. And that drives the need for having a very solid digital infrastructure and solutions, because if you wouldn't have that, you would be basically blind or deaf to how the product is utilized, and at the same time committing and promising to the customers on certain reliability or efficiency without any whatsoever control on how to deliver it. Gosh. So that's the nature of the business, and that's why this domain became more and more critical.
Really fascinating. I'm not going to indulge myself any further on this. I'm not sure listeners like how fascinating you find out the deep dive into it. I'm just a nerd, so we'll move on. How did you end up then, I suppose, at Wärtsilä using less? Like, what was and say less, for those of you that don't know, less was something that was devised, 15, maybe 20 years ago, like a long, long time ago, around the same time that was originally conceived. Ken Schreiber, I think they worked with Bas Vodde and Craig Larman around the same time. They work at Nokia Ericsson. Craig and Bas wrote a white paper, wrote some fantastic books, which has described a way to help organizations understand what their product is and how to get their teams having really accurate, empathetic understanding for their customers, and work really closely with the customers to deliver the right thing in small pieces and get feedback on it. As a system, as an approach, less has been around for many years, and it is seen as increasingly seen as a great option for companies who want to find a way to get multiple teams all aligning upon a really clear purpose. So, Mauro, how did you end up in this situation where you're using less?
Let me tell you the story. First of all, I have to admit that I didn't know less until roughly 3 years ago, when I took this specific role, where, by the way, I worked for 20 years. And I've been a Scrum practitioner for, I don't even remember how many years, since roughly 2007. I've applied Scrum in pretty much all organizations where I've done development work, not because I'm obsessed about implementing Scrum or having agility. That serves always a purpose. And the main purpose is the flexibility that you get to reroute your firepower to what is truly valuable. And 3 years ago, I received the opportunity to lead the organization that I described to you earlier. And when I joined this organization, my predecessor told me that this organization was founded on principle of less with the Spotify model. And as I say, I admitted that, okay, I've been exposed to Scrum for quite many years. On the other hand, I learned from literature about Spotify model. I only heard about less, but frankly speaking, I didn't have enough knowledge. So what I did, as every other person, I hope when they don't know about something, they go and study. I bought a book, and especially I signed up for the first available bus training. And that was November 2001, if I'm not mistaken. And that training was a revelation for me. It opened my eyes, not because I'm fanatic about frameworks and I'm easily lured into something that can be seen as theoretical. I had two challenges at work that I recognized in the organization I'm responsible for. The first one was that we had inability to direct our firepower to the most valuable things to do for our customers because we were very fragmented into silos. And the second thing is that the human potential of our organization was somehow diminished by the hierarchical nature of the organization itself. And I'm keen about saying that because when I took this training, I came back to the office with two revelations, as I said. The first one was that the approach to product development, prioritization based on value, is perfectly reflecting the concept of one product and one backlog. And the second one is that people are at the center of the value creation with this. So it's not the framework, it's these two principles that definitely attracted me to this way of working, because I had two concrete problems that I wanted to address.
Yeah, it's so interesting you say some of those things, because I think it's really easy for people to talk about Scrum and say, well, it's one product backlog per product. But that's when all the problems with Scrum started in many respects, because no one actually really looked and said, what is my product? And so you could look at your organization and have it structured in such a way where you have lots of silos which are based upon the technical domain. And so each one of those technical domains is a product. You're going to end up in a world of pain when you try and use Scrum in that way, because it was never designed to be used effectively in that way. And that you are not customer centric at that point. Mm-hmm. And this is where I think less opens up eyes. And it opened up mine many years ago to say, well, no, actually, maybe they aren't your products. And this is where less gives you a great opportunity to say, well, actually, first of all, let's figure out what your product is. And then we'll say, now you can have one product backlog and prioritize on value. And magically, you can actually then prioritize on customer value. And what you're saying about the inability to direct firepower due to the silos. When you say direct firepower, was that about getting the right number of teams, right piece of work? Like, explain that a little bit for me.
It's agility that you have in an organization to prioritize and focus the effort of the people on what's most valuable for the customers on a broader scope than the typical silos that many companies are built around. So if you connect a little bit with what I try to describe very briefly about our business and what also we take care of as organization, we treat it now today as one product. On the other hand, when I joined this organization, it was divided in over 10 teams. Each one of them had its own backlog. Right. So when I say directing the firepower, very concretely speaking, I came across a situation where one of the team was working on something extremely valuable for the customer, where we had really even complained from customer on the field that our development was not up to speed with our promise. And we were having difficulty to prioritize the work from other teams to help this one team that was having challenges. Why? Because the other teams had their own backlog and their own priority. On the other hand, these priorities were less valuable if compared to the one that this one team had. So it was as simple, now I make it simple, it was as simple as removing those barriers and putting all the firepower of the organization to work against those items that are highest in value. This move requires, in my view, not a process. This is not about the process. And especially if I belong to a corporation, many corporations are tempted to jump into methods, framework, principles that are very process-driven because that's comfortable. It gives this kind of false sense of control, and it's more in line with what probably a big corporation, in the way that big corporations work. It's not about the process. What we needed was that necessary friction to bring all the requests from the customers on a comparable way in order to really decide what is the most valuable one we should work on. And that friction, in my view, is very positive because it forces you to think where you should direct your firepower. On the other hand, in multiple organizations that I've been, that friction is uncomfortable because it requires a lot of leadership, especially from product ownership. It requires people to have an open mind to understand what's best for your customers. And it requires also to give up on certain belief or something maybe that it's internally generated. And many organizations prefer to solve this by divide and conquer. So prioritization by organization, I think Bas calls it, which means create silos so that we don't need to have that friction. We don't need to have that conversation. That conversation, not having it, is a missed opportunity for value creation. So it's not a process.
Well said. I think it's hard for people to get over, though. Like playing devil's advocate, Scrum in many organizations, to your point, is I think you alluded to this really. It was just another way to control our people. And it wasn't about achieving a valuable focus. It was about constraining people and getting them to work from a controlled list of stuff and making sure that they were all done by a certain date. And let's look at their velocity. Let's make sure that look at the percentage of sprint completion. And so I think people, I forgive people for thinking that's what this is all about when they hear particularly the word Scrum. So what you're saying there about this necessary friction, this is a necessary friction that comes from saying we're not going to prioritize 10 individual lists. What we are going to do is we're going to prioritize one list or reprioritize constantly one list of work and make sure that as many of our teams as possible are all working from the most valuable pieces of work on that list. Is that a fair summary of what you were saying there?
Absolutely. And it also goes back to the way you treat customer requirements. So what you usually, when it is a customer requirement, there is at least a perception there should be some value behind it. In our industry, we don't have millions of customers. So the customers are fewer and they have a lot of weight. So sometimes customer request becomes almost a diktat. You have to do it. And that can lead you very easily in heavy customizations. So you're not anymore doing product development. You are doing IT service providing de facto, which is what you want to avoid. So it goes all the way from having that uncomfortable conversation that I think I mentioned it to our organization sometime remember that a customer request does not necessarily mean that this is the most important value item that we need to develop. Also, a customer request is often a user request, meaning that you are talking to a customer, but de facto you're talking to an individual person of the customer organization. Those request needs to be validated with multiple users from the customer, maybe other customer, before you draw into conclusion and you jump into develop something. And when you start to question and challenge, and especially when you start to put items in competition with each other, you create that friction that we discussed so far. In my view, and I'm a strong believer of this, that friction is absolutely positive. That it's a dialogue that you need to have to do proper product ownership. It requires lots of guts though, because in a big corporation, you might be digging your own political grave if it's not done in due manners. Sometimes you need to compromise. Sometimes you can, raise the volume of your voice. So it requires a bit of a balancing act. On the other hand, I'm a strong believer of this principle. So one product, one backlog, thinking what is your product and don't make it too small, remove the silos and go for one backlog that creates. It's a perfect platform to create that conversation. That friction that we discussed so far.
You stole my question, because at the very top, when you were kind of talking through things, I did write down here, you're not going to end up with lots of customization and very bespoke products. And you've helped with that. And what I loved about your answer, what you shared with us then, and I think everyone listening would also appreciate this, was that product ownership in many organizations, when people think about it, it's just that team level. You don't have the opportunity to have those conversations. You're not in any position organizationally, and I use the word hierarchically because often that's what it comes down to stand up and have that fight. You're not even aware. Some people can't even go and talk to the customer, and then when you started talking like that, what you sounded like was a very experienced product manager. And then you did the bait and switch at the end and said that's what it takes to be a good product owner. And I think this is really interesting. In your mind then, for what you do at Wärtsilä, or maybe even just generally, do you see a difference between a product manager and a product owner?
This is, frankly speaking, I have difficulty to respond this question to you because I would say it's a domain where we are still learning. We do have a product owner who is owning the product we develop and de facto mediating across multiple organizations and customer requests in order to find that one prioritization for that one backlog that then we use to direct our firepower. On the other hand, we do have a lot of product managers from various organizations that are requesting or proxying sometimes also customer requests to this one product owner we have. So yes, there is a difference. And as I said, I have difficulty to describe to you because it's a bit of a learning process for us too. If I try to summarize it, the product owner as we have it, I would say reflects very much the role of a product owner in a less organization. So he's that one person who owns the product and has the authority to prioritize. The product management organization are those organizations in our company that are developing the business that this product is sometimes part of. And then maybe this is a bit of a difference comparing to a company where these two roles might be one. So our product is not sold standalone. It does not play a role by itself. It's part of a bigger ecosystem of services. Usually it's an agreement that we sign with the customer where the product we have is only one of the parts that goes to customer in terms of value creation. And I know it might add some complexity. This is the reality of the business we are in. I suspect that many other companies, especially big corporations with a long history, are similarly placed because they want to develop their digital product usually in a synergetic way to avoid duplication and this side effect that we discussed. On the other hand, they have a lot of go-to-market solutions that might reutilize that one product in multiple different ways. So there is that internal push and pull and friction that we discussed so far. I hope I try to respond to your questions. As I said, I don't have easy of life in responding because this is a topic that we are learning along the journey.
It's a topic that lots of people are interested in, and it's a question that's always thrown out there, and it isn't one where there is a definitive answer which applies correctly to every context, because it does differ wildly in organizations, and you just can't say there's a unifying truth of it all. But one thing that does seem to be a common pattern is that product managers tend to spend more of their time looking out to the customer, whereas product owners balancing their time looking out and looking in to the organization as well and having those hard internal conversations is one pattern which you see is reasonably, I suppose, consistent, I've found. But even then, there's always going to be differences in times when that isn't the case. And I think you find in smaller companies, maybe there is one person there who does them both. But at the same time, lots of companies, they don't start off using Scrum from a less perspective. And they're on that journey. And on that journey, things will change, and they're probably going to be actually having an existing incumbent product organization or product managers that already exist. So, yeah, obviously it does depend hugely, but Les does ask for a much more serious kind of approach to product ownership. Now, what you were saying about again, to get back to that necessary friction for a second, it reminded me when we used Less Huge at Deutsche Bank, and we walked in, and I was told the other day, I think it was, we had 45 projects, and we looked at, okay, this is crazy. Why is there 45 projects? And we looked at understanding what the product was, and deep down in our heart of hearts we knew there was one product, but we went for free because the friction between getting person from product one stakeholder and product two stakeholders, actually they wouldn't be in the same room together, and we thought we'd have enough of a challenge going from 45 projects to 3 products, let alone trying to deal with these two people that just can't stand the sight of each other. So whilst so I think that was a big lesson for us, and I admire the fact that you went from those 10 backlogs to 1. And did you do that in one move? Just kind of one day it all flipped and you were just on one backlog and then you created that necessary friction and dealt with it? Or was it more gradual?
We did it one go. And first of all, we were not an incredibly big organization. We had roughly 10 teams. So we're not talking about 45 projects or hundreds of teams. And too much small fragmentation to take it step by step. In order to have a meaningful critical mass to really make a dent in agility and directing the firepower to the most valuable item, we decided to go in one big bang, or relatively big, but big bang anyway. And that's what we did. So all the previous backlog have been merged into one backlog, and that necessary friction started. And we elevated implicitly the role of the product owner, because you are absolutely correct. The product owner is not a requirement analyst or I've seen a lot of interpretation of product ownership in my career. In an organization that is adopting less principles, product owner is a serious role, and it needs to be respected. It's not, by the way, a nice role, or the role can be nice, but it doesn't necessarily need to be always a nice person, because there are hard decisions to be made. And I think, I want to rephrase this. It's not about being a nice person, but it doesn't necessarily need to be a person who is only making himself or herself popular. It's actually quite the opposite. Often
you won't get anywhere if you just want to be popular. It isn't. I've got in my certified less training that I give, they've got a slide when we talk about product owner that says don't be nice, because it can't be about being nice. Because if you're trying to be nice to everyone, then you end up, and I think nice is a very subjective thing, but what we're saying is that no, or at least saying not, is an incredibly powerful thing to do. And there's a product manager we had on called Jenny Saachi, who said, she spends probably a good proportion of her day every day saying no or not yet to people, but that's what being a good product person is about.
Yeah. And in our domain, because I want to really give you the reality flavor, it also means, as you also were said before, understanding what is politically doable, because there's no point to theoretically push to the most idealistic scenario. If that would be a suicidal move, then nobody achieves anything. So you need to compromise sometimes. We decided yet to go for one backlog, and we secured also that we would have our upper management leadership to back it up. So you need to be able to calibrate what you can do, because somebody will be disappointed. And some organizations, some customers that are going to be disappointed means also that they are not going to be able to harness business value. As you say, not yet, maybe later. But this later, especially for stock listed company, means maybe missing 1-2 quarters or even the whole financial year. And that has a financial impact. And this kind of thing you need to take into account. So the senior leadership support to go for one product because there is a synergetic value into it, as versus the drawback of maybe failing on some of the shorter term deliverables for some of the businesses. At the end of the day, it's a business case. So you need some time to compromise in order to not basically suicide politically, and then actually nobody has anything to gain into it. Nevertheless, in our case, we were able to go for one product, one backlog. And I have to say a couple of years of very good friction to adapt to that way of working. And by the way, that friction will never end, because if that would end, it would be a bad sign in my view.
Yeah. Why would it be a bad sign?
Because if you don't have friction, it means that you don't have dialogue. If you don't have dialogue, it means that maybe you don't need to have that dialogue, because you are more independent, and independence usually means silo for me. And if you have a dialogue, it's unavoidable that at times you will have friction, especially when it comes to the time, not yet, or sometimes it's also clear no, then not everybody's happy, and that of course creates a friction. So as long as there are signs of friction, it means that we are having a good conversations that is the best for the company and our customers.
I had a quote, and then I realized it wasn't a quote that was in my head, about if things aren't uncomfortable sometimes, and you're probably not trying hard enough. Like if it's all too easy and all too happy, then it's like at some point that's going to bite you on the arse, as we'd say in the UK. You need a bit of that uncomfortableness to keep people at the edge of trying something new, trying something different. This isn't a conversation about OKRs, but if you looked at OKRs as an example, they work when it forces people to stretch. And when there are very, very few of them, set one, and the same as like a roadmap, set a really clear goal, make it a stretch, get people challenged. It's going to feel uncomfortable, but you're going to get there. You're going to have uncomfortable conversations to remain that focused, but you're going to get there. And hopefully it's the right bet you put on and it pays off.
I can give you a word that I learned from many training that I do, many leadership training. Nowadays, we are supposed to always use the positive terms.
Okay.
It's not challenge, it's not uncomfortable. These are courageous conversations that are very needed.
Nice. I think I'll stick to uncomfortable. There was a CTA that I coached for a while, and they were phenomenal. But for one thing, I learned a lot from this person. And they said that all of their career and their life, they'd avoided having what they would always see as the difficult conversation. And they found that one simple, and it's one of those classic clickbaity things, like one simple hack solved it all for them. They just got it from a title of a book. They said they stopped seeing those conversations as difficult and just saw them as crucial.
There you go.
And the moment this person decided that they're crucial conversations, they thought to themselves, well, I can't avoid that, can I? If it's crucial, then I need to step up and have this conversation now. And I think that's part of a difficulty, isn't it? I think with some of the words that we use. And I think the one thing that a good mindset, a good product mindset, one thing that a good, or something like less will provide, is that opportunity to have those crucial conversations frequently, because that means that you're trying something. I love that. Now, I want to loop back around because I'm just keeping an eye on the time and it is slipping through our fingers. You said about the human potential being inhibited by hierarchy. That's the other reason why this is the less cause kind of structure review. Like, in what way was human potential inhibited by hierarchy?
This topic is very close to my heart. Well, there is a big difference between, if you look at an organization that does agile development, it's often associated to software. As I say, we don't only do software. And I like, by the way, from less principle, we are doing product development. And also in our case, we also deliver it actually in the life cycle. There is an approach that tends to look at this type of organization as IT service providers. So they provide an infrastructure, they provide the software, and they're usually told what to code. And this mindset is hard to change, especially keep in mind that many of the people who are operating in our industries are very solid, with a very solid background in mechanical, electrical engineering. Software is a an emerging domain. And software in this company has been exposed to people who have a primarily mechanical background, primarily as software needed for internal purpose. Like, for example, you need to develop a report from your CRM solution. And then usually you outsource that because you tell what you want and there is an external company that does the work for you and then you get it. So now instead, the software element and also the hardware that is needed to run the software become the product or part of the product. And all of a sudden, they are not anymore something that you can just outsource and delegate to an IT service provider. They become a critical, using the word, a critical engineering discipline that should be put on the same table next to other very needed discipline like mechanical or electrical dimension. It's a huge mental step though. And when I joined this organization, I found a lot of super clever people with master degree in physics, PhD in advanced mathematics, you name it. And I said, okay, how are we working today? Well, we are asked things to code. Don't you have anything to say about why are we coding this and what are we trying to achieve? Of course I do. On the other hand, the organization we are interfacing to are most of the time simply cascading down requirements that many of the developers didn't have any idea where they were coming from. So there was too much hierarchical gap in between the problem that usually is, or the opportunity that you want to seize with your customer, and at the end, what a person who is doing product development gets on the table. And that's what I mean, missed opportunity, because you have a lot of capable people who are not utilized at their full potential, nor even motivated to really express their full potential. And this is, for me, is the cultural shift that needs to undergo corporations that do not have the software element in their DNA today. On the other hand, they should have it down the road. It's about elevating the people who are doing software engineering and put them around the table with the other engineering discipline to work together around the problem or the opportunity. That's product development for me. And that's the human element that I loved in Less, because in Less, a lot actually is asked to the people and to the teams. A lot. And let me tell you, I also, a lot more than what I estimated. I underestimated this aspect. It takes time for the organization you belong to shift the mindset, and also for the developer themselves to actually start to, hey, wait a second, I can actually grow into this. The question is also, do I want to grow? Some people don't necessarily want to grow. Some people instead really want to seize the opportunity, and then you need to give them time. So that's the human element I'm talking about, Ben. And that's why it's very close to my heart, because it's about getting really the true potential of people and getting the motivation from people to express themselves.
So do you feel that you are now closer to untapping all that potential?
Yes, and I am confident about it because I see a lot of individual and a lot of team flourishing. I want to also, though, to be very open about this. It's not a walk in the park. Some individuals, some people don't necessarily like to work in an environment where a lot more is demanded from them. Some people really, truly just want to code and be told what to do. And that's probably, this is not the right place to be, because we expect more. And we also expect that people will be curious and learn new things, help their team beyond their comfort zone. So we are in that trajectory. We are far better than 3 years ago, definitely. It's not a short-term journey. It's about creating a culture. It's about creating a mindset. And it's for the long term. It's for the long term. And that's also one of the challenges, I believe, if you want to use this word, that wants to engage in a transformation on less principle needs to take into account. You need to play the long game. There are, of course, quick wins. And nevertheless, creating an organization and with this culture, it takes long time.
Yeah. I think it's always so vastly underestimated. I think particularly when you're a senior person in an organisation, or dare I say, someone acting in a coaching capacity, just think, so why wouldn't they want to sit around the table? Why wouldn't they want to speak to the customers? And do you know what? Lots of people don't initially. I think it's a real problem that we have where we assume that other people are going to think like we do. And we need to remember, and I'm talking about myself here, absolutely, I've been guilty of this. I didn't really appreciate what it was to be a engineer, a developer, programmer, whatever we want to label these great people as, in a modern digital organization. I hadn't done it for a long time, so I didn't really know what it was like. So my assumption that everyone wanted to do it was just flawed. But there were people that did want to do it. They just needed opportunity. But even then, it still took a long time for them to want to take the opportunity because they were fearful for many reasons, whether it was because, particularly for us, English was like their fourth or fifth language or something, and they had to go and talk to somebody in English, and they were a bit like, if they're a senior person in a bank or something, I don't want to appear silly in front of them. Once it started, it's fine. No one ever looked back. But it takes a long time. It takes a lot of dedication. And so when you have people in your organization that don't fit this mold, have you found that people have left, or have you kept people on but put them in a different, give them some kind of, I don't know, free pass so they don't have to get involved with these types of situations?
No. We are quite adamant that people who are belonging to teams, they need to do the best to make the team successful, even if it means working, for example, on a domain or an expertise that they don't have. We stress the fact that we are a learning organization. Sometimes learning is and should be a deliverable per se. So it means that if you are picking up work that is not in your comfort zone as an individual or a team, maybe you need to dedicate a sprint or two to learn that domain with other teams that are proficient in order to learn. So we didn't create anomaly. We try to avoid them as much as we could, because we thought it would prevent ultimately the shift to this kind of mindset. It would make it even longer. So, and I can tell you, this was also a necessary friction. So, and frankly speaking, one that I have to admit I underestimated, because I thought that an individual who is offered to have more freedom, to give more even opportunity to question the why, to contribute, to define the how to do things, and speak directly with the customer, with other colleagues, rather than be told what to do. I thought people would love that, because it puts them in a much more exposed role, learning situation where you are really understanding why you're doing certain things, etc. Not everyone likes that. And I was surprised personally. So maybe this is a bit of a blind spot of me. I was surprised. And on the other hand, many other people, of course, do love it. So that's, but we were not creating anomalies, no. Where we try to minimize that as much as we could.
Yeah, I admire that. I think when you're going to go on this type of change journey, you got to understand what I hate the phrase, but what the guardrails are. What is called red lines. My old COO used to explain it by saying that you've been playing your game for a long time in the organization, and let's say your game is tennis, and we're coming along with a new version of tennis, where the court is a different shape and the rackets are somewhat different and the ball's a different way. I need to find a way to kind of play our game of tennis. You can't watch the ball go out and say, that's in, because it used to be in. The lines have moved now. And so now you're playing this game. And if you don't like the game, then we'll help you find somewhere you can go play a game you're more comfortable with. If you want to learn how to play this game with us, then we'll give you the right support, the right coaching, the right education, so that you can then develop the right muscles and the right attitude to play this new version of the game. And we understand that if you don't, then that's fine, and we'll help you find somewhere else.
Yeah. That's exactly what we did. And also, we try to be as frank as we can with everyone who's coming in also, that we are trying to bridge also two cultures that are coming closer with each other. So the domain, the software domain, or the IT domain in general, has a different dynamic, different life cycle, speed and cycle than the mechanical world. For obviously, it's much more dynamic. And there is also, let me be very, very open, there is also a generational gap. There are many more youngsters in the software domain that are emerging, and they're colliding at sometimes also with people who are from previous generation. And so it's about blending in two culture in terms of domain, so software, mechanical, at a different pace, and also different generation in terms of really age. Talking really about age.
Yeah.
And when we get people on board, we explain them, of course, that this friction will be there. And it's a lot to ask to the people, because we are asking for the older people who are maybe more rooted into the history and the mechanical history of the company, which is absolutely super valuable for what we do. They need to accept also that these youngsters are coming up with a lot of new ideas. Some of them will make sense, some of them will not make sense. On the other hand, they don't want to sound arrogant. So it's just that they need to ventilate and express what they come up with. Otherwise, they would be just told what to do. And on the other hand, the youngster needs to also respect and accept that some of the colleagues who are coming from the mechanical world actually know a lot. Now, what I usually say, because I came across both cases, by the way, is that I told sometimes to our guys, you cannot go into a meeting with the customers and mechanical engineer pretending that you know about combustion technology because you read it from Wikipedia yesterday. You need to respect that this is another job, and we have people who are very experienced in that. At the same time, I tell to the mechanical engineer from other organizations, guys, you cannot go into a meeting with customer and us pretending that you know about software because you made an Excel yesterday. That's not software engineering. You need to respect that this is a different profession, and we have people experienced with that. So it's all the time this continuous bridging effort to bring two community and two generations to work together to get 1 + 1 = 3 rather than -1.
Yeah, that's bad math. You don't want that.
I know, I'm Italian. Poetic license? How do you call it?
That's lovely. I love it. So we're kind of almost at time, but there was one question I wanted to ask you. We focused on some of the kind of negative aspects here, but then you did say that some teams flourished. And I was just wondering if you could give us a brief insight, in Wärtsilä, for you personally, as a senior person in an organization, when you say that a team is flourishing, what are you seeing?
Great question. I love it. First of all, I see different dynamics in the team. The teams take ownership. The team care about the work they do. They care about the product. They care about the success of the team and helping each other, irrespective if one guy who know and likes more doing backend, tomorrow needs to do some front end or data scientist, or even go and interview the customers. So people who are truly going beyond their comfort zone and with a good smile also. So I've seen teams that are having excellent positive dynamics because they embrace the simple principle that we are doing product development. I'm a team member. The success of my team is the primary objective for value creation. And I do whatever it takes in my team to help that team succeed and therefore deliver value to customer. And when that dynamic creates, and by the way, it does not go to technical skill only. It's a lot of soft skill, leadership, and attitude. Then you have the perfect mix. And I've seen it in few teams. Really, like when it clicks, it's a pleasure to the eyes.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Mauro. Now, we're at time. Unfortunately, I'm trying to get really good at keeping the episodes like 45 minutes, and we're just a tad over. Thank you so much for your time and your energy. As I mentioned it a couple of times, I'm a large-scale Scrum trainer, and I have my courses in London like a couple of times a year. And the people that come along, I don't think anybody leaves with what they thought they were going to leave with when they come along to a less course, because it isn't about Scrum, in my opinion. It's about so much more, so many things that are useful for people in product worlds or in kind of engineering roles. I think so it's really great to hear your perspective on all of this. I think you give a really honest and compelling account for people. Honestly, I think, just to go and learn more about less, whether that's from me or whether it's from somebody else. So I think, thank you so much for coming on and making this time. It's been a joy to have you on. But if people wanted to connect with you and ask you a question about something you've brought up on the podcast, or just interested in researching you, I take it LinkedIn is a good place to find you?
Absolutely. You can find me LinkedIn. You can contact me directly there, and then we find whatever means of communication he or she wants, then I can continue there. Absolutely. I would recommend, by the way, not only product developers or people who want to go into coaching to go to a less training. I would actually recommend organization leaders, because the less training for me was primarily about principle on how to design organization to succeed, from the human aspect and from the principle on how to design it. So and that was also an eye-opener for me.
No, you're right. I think this is where there's a course called the Certified Less Executives, which is like it's a bit less scary than a 3-day course. It's a 2-day course, but I offer them publicly, but I don't run them publicly anymore, because what I find is that people will come along and ask about it. And when you speak to them, actually, what's much more valuable for me just to go in their organization for a couple of days, it probably ends up being a similar price if they're going to chuck a few people on the course. But then you actually get to really go into that organizational design element. So that's the bits of large-scale Scrum that I like. If people are interested in finding out more about Less, you can go to www.less, so less.works, works. If you're interested in looking what I do when it comes to Less, and head to www.sheev, that's sheev.co.uk, and there you can see my Less courses and some other courses I deliver. With that said, thank you everyone for listening. It's been a fantastic episode and really nice to kind of just hear about large-scale Scrum again. Mauro, thank you very much for giving up your time to come on the podcast and share your insights and your expertise with our listeners. Anything you'd like to share, Mauro, before we head off?
Don't give up. It's worth it. And thanks a lot, Ben, for having me here. And thanks for the audience to listening to us.
Well, because Mauro, you are a listener of the podcast at times. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I'd love to chat afterwards. I'd love to know what it's like going from listener to interviewee. Everyone, again, thank you so much for listening. And this is the Product Agility Podcast, and we'll be back again next week.